The stars twinkled softly in the quiet of the vast galaxy, but there was something different about the messages drifting through space. It wasn't the usual hum of data transmissions or simple communications. These messages were desperate. Across the galaxy, from the technologically advanced civilizations of the Rethar Empire to the mighty coalition of the Illuvian Dominion, the messages were ignored. The plea for help came from the Zirani, an ancient alien species whose star system was on the edge of collapsing. Their home planet, once teeming with life, was now fading, and a deadly supernova was threatening to wipe out their entire race. Time was running out, and they needed help, but no one answered. The Rethar Empire, known for their superiority, dismissed the Zirani as too old and too far gone to save. The Illuvian Dominion, with its powerful fleet and sprawling colonies, claimed that the Zirani had failed to evolve, and that assisting them would be a waste of resources. Every other major power in the galaxy, all more advanced than humanity, simply turned away. But not Earth. In a small command center on Earth, a message from the Zirani had been received. It had arrived at the Terran Coalition's main space station, an organization that represented all of humanity's spacefaring colonies. The message was filled with desperation. An alien race, once proud and powerful, now on the verge of extinction. They spoke of their dying planet and the approaching supernova that would soon destroy everything they had known. But they did not ask for a miracle. They only asked for help. Captain Aria Voss sat at the command desk in the Terran Coalition headquarters, looking at the glowing words of the message. Her hand hovered over the controls, but she didn't immediately respond. She had been born in a world where humans were still finding their place in the stars. They were a young species, still learning how to defend themselves and navigate the vastness of space. Some had doubted whether humanity would even survive the first few generations in the harshness of space. They had no massive fleets like the Rethar or advanced technologies like the Illuvians. What did humanity have that could possibly help the Zirani? Yet, something in her heart told her that they had to act. She knew that the universe wasn't just about advanced technology or military power. It was about hope and courage and the willingness to do what others would not. And that was something humanity had in abundance. "Captain, are you sure about this?" The voice of her second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Torres, broke through her thoughts. Sarah stood next to Aria, her brow furrowed as she looked at the same message on the screen. Aria nodded, her eyes steady. "The Zirani are asking for help, and we're the only ones who even received their message. If we turn away, then we prove that we're no better than the others who've abandoned them. But we're not ready," Sarah said quietly. "We don't have the resources. Our fleet is small, and our technology is limited compared to the other powers. We're a small player in this galaxy. What if we fail?" "We will try," Aria replied firmly. "We might not be the strongest or the oldest, but we are the ones who will act. We're not going to let them die, because it's easier to ignore them. Humanity is built on hope. It's time we show the galaxy what that means." Sarah looked at her for a moment before nodding slowly. "Understood, Captain." Aria sent a response to the Zirani, agreeing to help. The decision had been made. There was no turning back now. The Terran Coalition wasn't the strongest force in the galaxy, but their hearts were filled with something more: compassion, empathy, and the willingness to step forward when others refused. News of the decision spread quickly across the coalition. Some were skeptical, wondering if they should focus on their own security instead of taking on such a massive, risky mission. But Aria Voss knew what it meant. This was humanity's chance to prove itself, not through weapons or politics, but through action. With a final glance at the message from the Zirani, Aria stood up from the command desk. "Prepare the EOs," she ordered. "We leave in 2 days. The Zirani are depending on us." As the preparations began, Aria couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a mission to save a distant alien species. This was humanity's first real test in the stars. It was their moment to show the galaxy that, despite their youth, Despite their limited resources, they would always choose to help those in need. In the quiet of space, away from the powerful empires and established civilizations, humanity was about to make a bold statement, a statement that would echo through the galaxy for years to come. The decision to help the Ziranai was made, and now the hard part began. Humanity had never faced such a challenge. The Terran Coalition was still young in terms of space exploration, and their resources were limited compared to the older, more powerful civilizations of the galaxy. But Captain Aria Voss had faith in her people. She knew that humanity's strength lay not in the size of their fleet or the power of their weapons, but in their willingness to fight for what was right. In the heart of the Terran Coalition's headquarters, a massive space station orbiting Earth, Aria stood before a holographic map of the galaxy. The Ziranai home system was located far from the well-trodden routes of the major galactic empires. Reaching it would require navigating through dangerous regions of space, some of which were uncharted. It wasn't going to be easy, but it had to be done. "Captain, are we really going to do this?" Lieutenant Sarah Torres asked once again, though her tone was less doubtful and more concerned now. "We'll be crossing into territory that's not exactly friendly to humans. We've never ventured this far." Aria didn't turn from the map, but her voice was steady. "We don't have a choice, Sarah. The Ziranai are counting on us. No one else is going to help them." They stood in silence for a moment. The weight of the decision hung in the air, thick and heavy. For a species still finding its way in the cosmos, this mission was a monumental step. The Eos, their flagship, was the most advanced ship the Terran Coalition had, but even it wasn't equipped for long journeys into hostile, unknown territories. "We're ready to go, Captain," a voice came from behind them. It was Commander David Hall, the chief engineer. He had a rugged demeanor, but his confidence was contagious. He was the one who would ensure that the Eos was prepared for the journey. "We've patched up every system, and I've triple-checked the engines. The Eos can handle the trip." Aria turned to him and nodded. "I know, David. I trust you." Within hours, the Eos was ready for launch. It was a sleek, powerful vessel, capable of faster-than-light travel, though its engines had never been pushed to such limits. The crew was a mix of seasoned officers and young, eager cadets, all of whom shared the same goal: to save a species on the brink of extinction. As the ship's engines roared to life, and the massive docking bay doors opened to the stars, Aria stood at the command center, watching as the ship ascended from Earth's atmosphere. She could feel the tension in the air, but also something else, a quiet sense of resolve. Humanity was about to take its place in the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as protectors. "Set course for the Ziranai system," Aria commanded. "We're going to need all the speed we can get." The Eos shot forward, its engines glowing brightly as it entered the vastness of space. The crew settled into their stations, and the hum of the ship was all around them. As they moved further from Earth, the world they knew became a distant memory, and the unknown became their new reality. Despite the challenges ahead, there was a sense of unity among the crew. There were no quarrels, no complaints, only a shared determination to succeed. This was a mission unlike any other, and they all knew the stakes. They were not just helping the Ziranai. They were making a statement. Humanity was a force for good, and they would not be deterred. Days passed as the Eos sailed deeper into uncharted space. The crew had to adapt quickly, adjusting to the strange new regions of the galaxy they passed through. They encountered space debris fields, magnetic storms, and even a few rogue asteroids. Yet, despite the dangers, the crew pressed on. Each time they faced a new challenge, they found a way to overcome it. It was not just their technology that allowed them to continue. It was their ingenuity, their ability to think on their feet, that set them apart from the other species in the galaxy. On the 5th day of their journey, as the crew gathered in the mess hall for their evening meal, Aria stood at the front, watching them. They were tired, but there was a quiet strength in their eyes. They knew what they were doing was important. "We're almost there," Aria said, her voice calm but firm. "Keep pushing, everyone. The Zeranai are depending on us." A cheer went up from the crew, and for a brief moment, the weight of the journey seemed a little lighter. They weren't just a small human crew in a massive galaxy. They were a team, working together toward a common goal. The stars outside the EOS's windows seemed to shine brighter as the ship neared its destination. The Zeranai system was within reach, and time was running out. The supernova that threatened to destroy everything the Zeranai had built was still looming, and if they didn't act quickly, it would be too late. But Aria was confident. Humanity had come this far, and they wouldn't stop now. "We're going to make it," she whispered to herself, looking out at the stars. And for the first time since they left Earth, she truly believed it. As the EOs approached the Zeranai system, the vast emptiness of space became more tangible. The stars around them seemed distant, but the crew's focus was sharp. They were about to enter the heart of a dying world, and the stakes had never felt so high. Time was running out for the Zeranai, and they could not afford to waste a single moment. Captain Aria Voss stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the view screen. The Zeranai home planet, once a vibrant and thriving world, now looked small and fragile. Dark clouds of smoke and ash spiraled above its surface, and the blue oceans that once teemed with life were now eerily still. The planet was gasping for its final breath. Approaching the Zeranai planet, the ship's navigator, Lieutenant Jonas, announced, his voice filled with a mix of awe and sadness. "Supernova countdown is at 72 hours and counting." Aria's grip tightened on the armrest of her chair. "Prepare for orbit insertion. We need to make contact with their leaders immediately." As the EOs descended into orbit, the crew braced themselves. They had never encountered a species in such a desperate state, and the unknowns of what awaited them weighed heavily on their minds. Would the Zeranai welcome them, or would they see them as just another group of invaders, too late to save them? A transmission request from the Zeranai government came through, and Aria's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped they would be willing to talk, but the truth was they had no idea what to expect. The Zeranai had already sent out numerous distress signals, but they hadn't received any help from other galactic empires. Aria knew that their first meeting could make or break this mission. "Put it through," she ordered. On the view screen, a tall figure appeared, an elderly Zeranai with silver skin and glowing violet eyes. His expression was one of both grief and hope. This was Elder Myrath, the leader of the Zeranai people. He looked like someone who had seen the best of his species' civilization, and now had the heavy task of witnessing its end. "Captain Voss, I presume." Elder Myrath's voice was soft but firm, the weight of his words heavy. "I see that humanity has chosen to arrive, but it is too late. You cannot save us." Aria stood tall, refusing to let the elder's words shake her resolve. "We haven't come here to give up, Elder Myrath. We've come to help, and we will do everything in our power to save your people." The elder's expression softened, but his eyes still held doubt. "I admire your courage, Captain, but you do not understand the gravity of our situation. Our planet is dying, and our people are scattered, broken, and desperate. There is no technology, no magic, that can reverse the effects of the supernova. You are wasting your time." "We're not here to turn back time," Aria replied calmly. "We're here to get you to safety. We can evacuate your people, find them a new home." For a long moment, there was silence. Aria could see the struggle in Elder Myrath's eyes. It was clear he had little faith that anything could be done. After all, every other galactic power had turned their back on his people. Why would humanity be any different? Finally, the elder spoke again. "You are the first to offer us hope in many years, Captain. But I fear the cost will be far too high. We do not have the resources, nor the ships, to evacuate everyone." Aria's voice was unwavering. "We have everything we need. We've already begun preparations. Your people don't have to die here." Elder Myrath's expression faltered. "But you don't know us, Captain. You don't know what we have lost. We've failed to protect our own. We've lost our families, our cities, our entire way of life. The loss of our planet is only the beginning of our fall. Aria's heart ached for the Zirenei. She could see the sorrow and guilt etched in the elder's face, but she also saw something else. The spark of a leader who, despite everything, had not given up. "We will help you rebuild," Aria said softly. "It will take time, but we will not let you fall. Together, we can start again." Elder Myrath's violet eyes searched hers, as if weighing the truth of her words. Finally, he nodded, though the weight of the decision seemed almost too much to bear. "Very well, Captain Voss," he said quietly. "If you believe this is possible, we will follow your lead." As the transmission ended, Aria took a deep breath. The first step had been taken, but the journey ahead would be far from easy. The Zirenei were willing to trust them, but they were broken, scattered across their planet, some hiding in underground bunkers, others stranded in cities that had long since fallen into ruin. "We'll need to find them," Aria said to her crew. "Every last one of them. We won't leave anyone behind." Commander David Hall, standing by her side, nodded. "We'll get them out, Captain. We've got the ships, and we'll use every resource we have." But as the EOS prepared to deploy its teams to search for the Zirenei survivors, a new challenge emerged. The Zirenei planet was no longer a safe place. Violent storms raged across the surface, and earthquakes rattled the planet's crust. The crew had to work quickly, knowing that every passing minute brought them closer to the inevitable destruction of the Zirenei home. The clock was ticking, and the fate of an entire civilization rested in their hands. Would humanity succeed where every other civilization had failed? Only time would tell. But Aria knew one thing for sure: they would never give up. Not while there was still hope. The EOS orbited the dying planet as the crew worked tirelessly to locate the scattered survivors of the Zirenei. The situation was dire. Every passing hour saw the planet's condition worsen. Massive storms, tremors, and eruptions made it nearly impossible to land safely. Still, the crew of the EOS refused to give up. They had promised the Zirenei they would help, and they would do everything they could to keep that promise. Captain Aria Voss stood in the command center, her eyes scanning the planet's surface on the large view screen. The once beautiful world was now a chaotic mess of fire and ash. Still, there were signs of life, small pockets of survivors, hiding in the few safe areas left. They just had to find them before it was too late. "Captain," Lieutenant Jonas said from his station, "we've detected several heat signatures on the surface. They're in the northern hemisphere, near what used to be a city." Aria's heart raced. This was the break they had been waiting for. "Plot a course, Jonas. We're going down." Within minutes, the EOS began its descent toward the northern hemisphere of the planet. The ship shook as it entered the planet's atmosphere, its shields holding firm against the intense heat and radiation. The crew was on edge, but Aria could see the determination in their eyes. They had trained for this, but nothing could fully prepare them for the challenges they faced here. "Commander Hall, how's the landing team?" Aria asked, turning to the chief engineer, who had been overseeing the deployment of rescue teams. "They're ready, Captain," Hall replied, his voice steady. "We've got our best team on the ground. They'll be able to find the survivors, no matter what." Aria nodded. "Good. Let's move fast. We can't afford to waste time." The EOS touched down gently in what had once been a thriving city. Now, it was little more than rubble, with only a few buildings still standing. The streets were deserted, save for the occasional flash of movement in the shadows. The Zirenei survivors were hiding, and it was up to the Terran team to find them. Aria, along with Lieutenant Sarah Torres and Commander Hall, led the rescue team. They wore protective suits to shield themselves from the toxic air and dangerous radiation. As they stepped onto the cracked and broken streets, the silence was overwhelming. It felt as though the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. "Keep your eyes open," Aria ordered. The survivors could be anywhere. The team split up, moving cautiously through the ruined city. The air was thick with smoke, and the ground beneath their boots trembled occasionally, signaling more tremors. Aria's mind raced with thoughts of what might be happening to the Ziranai, who were hiding in these ruins. Were they all right? Were they scared? She had to believe they could make it out alive. Minutes later, they found their first group of survivors. A small group of Ziranai huddled in a collapsed building, clearly frightened but alive. Their silver skin was covered in ash, and their glowing eyes seemed dimmer than usual. When they saw the humans, they recoiled at first, unsure if they could trust them. Aria stepped forward slowly, her voice calm. "We're here to help. We came from Earth. We're going to get you out of here." The Ziranai elder in the group, a woman with wrinkles etched deep into her face, looked up at Aria with suspicion. "You came from Earth. Why? Why would you risk your lives for us?" Aria smiled gently. "Because humanity believes in hope, even in the darkest times. You don't have to face this alone. We're here now." The elder's eyes softened, though the doubt remained. "There is no hope left for us. Our planet is dying, and we are too few to rebuild." "You're not alone anymore," Aria replied. "We'll help you start again." The team spent the next few hours helping the survivors gather what little they could carry. Aria was struck by how resilient they were, despite the crushing loss of their world. The Ziranai had seen their planet fall apart, their cities crumble, and yet they still fought to survive. It reminded Aria of humanity, of the way her people had fought to survive in the early days of space exploration. "We found more," Lieutenant Jonas reported over the comms. "There's another group to the south, near the last spaceport. We're going to need additional teams to get them out." Aria nodded. "Let's move. We don't leave anyone behind." The team pressed on, searching the ruins of the city for more survivors. Each new group they found was smaller than the last, but they were all grateful for the help. The Ziranai, though broken and battered, still had hope. And with every group they saved, that hope grew stronger. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the rescue teams had located and rescued nearly 200 Ziranai. They were tired, covered in dirt and ash. But they were alive. And for now, that was enough. As the final group boarded the Eos, Aria stood on the ship's ramp, watching the planet below. The sky was dark, the stars shining brightly through the smoke. They had only just begun the work of saving the Ziranai. But this was a start, and for the first time since they had arrived. Aria felt a sense of pride. Humanity had taken its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as protectors. And in that moment, Aria knew they would do everything in their power to help the Ziranai rebuild. "Let's go," she said, her voice steady but full of determination. "We've got a future to build." The Eos lifted off, leaving the dying planet behind. But it was not the end for the Ziranai. It was only the beginning. The Eos soared through space, carrying the survivors of the Ziranai people. Their home planet was now a distant memory, a place of tragedy and loss. But in the hearts of the survivors, a new hope was beginning to take root. As the ship glided through the stars, they were not just escaping the end of their world. They were preparing for a new beginning. Captain Aria Voss stood in the command center, looking out at the stars. The crew had worked tirelessly to bring the Ziranai to safety, but their mission was far from over. They had evacuated nearly 200 Ziranai, but there were still more scattered across the planet. Some were hiding in underground shelters, others had taken refuge in the last remaining cities, and all of them needed to be brought to safety before the planet's final collapse. "Captain," Lieutenant Jonas's voice broke through her thoughts. "We've got a message from Elder Myrath. He wants to speak with you." Aria's expression softened. The Ziranai leader had been a constant source of strength throughout their mission, and she knew this conversation would be important. "Put it through." The view screen flickered to life, and Elder Myrath appeared, his face still marked by the weight of his people's loss. But there was something different in his eyes now. Something that wasn't there before, a glimmer of hope. "Captain Voss," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We are grateful for your help. You've given us a chance to live, something we thought we had lost forever. But I must ask, where will we go? Our planet is gone. We have no home." Arya took a deep breath before answering. "We've already begun searching for a new planet, Elder Myrath. We will find a place for your people to start over. It won't be easy, but we will work together to make it happen." The elder nodded slowly, as if weighing her words. "I believe you, Captain, but many of our people are still in hiding. We are a broken people. Will you truly help us rebuild?" Arya's voice was firm. "We will. Humanity may be young in the grand scheme of the galaxy, but we've learned something important. We've learned that no one should be left behind, and we won't stop until every Zirinae is safe." Elder Myrath's eyes glistened with tears, but he said nothing more. Instead, he nodded, giving her his silent blessing. The transmission ended, and Arya's heart swelled with a mixture of determination and compassion. This was more than just a rescue mission. It was a promise, one that she intended to keep. As the Eos traveled through space, the crew continued to work around the clock. The ship was filled with survivors, Zirinae, who had once been proud of their civilization, now displaced and uncertain of what the future held. But the crew of the Eos had become their family. They shared their meals, their stories, and their hope for a better tomorrow. Arya walked through the ship, checking on the survivors. She saw the Zirinae children playing in the corridors, their laughter filling the air. They were young, but they still carried the weight of their people's loss. The adults sat quietly in small groups, whispering amongst themselves, trying to come to terms with the reality of their situation. "Captain, we've located more survivors," Commander Hall reported from the engineering bay. "They're spread out across the southern hemisphere. It's going to take some time, but we can get them." Arya nodded, a sense of urgency rising in her chest. "We'll get them all, David. We can't stop now." The Eos continued its search for the remaining survivors. The crew's dedication was unwavering, despite the many obstacles they faced. Every time they thought they were finished, another group of survivors was found. Some were injured, some were sick, but all were grateful to be brought aboard the ship and given the chance to live. Days turned into weeks, and the ship became a home to the displaced Zirinae. Arya could see the transformation taking place. Where there had once been fear and doubt, there was now a glimmer of hope. Elder Myrath, once so full of despair, was beginning to believe in the possibility of a future for his people. One evening, as Arya stood on the observation deck, gazing out at the endless expanse of space, she was joined by Commander Hall. The stars seemed brighter than usual tonight, as if reflecting the newfound hope that filled the Eos. "You're quiet tonight, Captain," David said, his voice casual but thoughtful. "You okay?" Arya smiled softly, turning to him. "I'm thinking about what comes next. We've rescued so many, but we still have a long way to go. And I'm wondering if we can truly give the Zirinae the future they deserve." David leaned against the railing beside her, his gaze also fixed on the stars. "I think we're already doing it. They've got the chance to rebuild, and they've got us. That's more than anyone else was willing to give them." Arya nodded, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. The journey was far from over, but they had made a difference. Humanity had chosen to act where others had turned away, and in doing so, they had given an entire civilization the chance to survive. As the Eos continued its journey through the stars, Captain Arya Voss knew one thing for certain: humanity would never stop fighting for what was right. The Zirinae had a future now, and Arya would make sure they would never face the end alone again. The Eos glided smoothly through the void of space, its engines humming steadily as it approached the newly discovered planet. The crew was excited, but the weight of the mission was heavy on their shoulders. For the Zirinae, this was more than just a new home. It was a second chance at life, a chance to rebuild everything they had lost. Captain Arya Voss stood at the bridge, watching the planet grow larger on the view screen. The blue-green world was beautiful, its atmosphere clear and inviting. It was everything they had hoped for and more. The Ziranite would be safe here, free from the war that had destroyed their world. But Arya knew the true work was just beginning. "Captain," Lieutenant Jonas said from his station, his voice filled with a quiet excitement, "we're approaching the planet's orbit. Everything looks good. We're ready to land." Arya nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and anticipation. "Prepare the landing teams. We'll get the Ziranite settled as quickly as possible." As the EOs descended through the atmosphere, the Ziranite survivors gathered in the main hangar, their faces a mix of awe and anxiety. This was their new home, but it felt so different from what they had known. They were unsure about what the future held, but they had come this far, and they were ready to take the next step. Elder Myrath stood near the front, his gaze fixed on the landing ramp. Beside him, Talia and a few other trusted Ziranite leaders exchanged quiet words, their minds racing with thoughts of what they would do once they set foot on the new planet. The journey had been long and difficult, but they were finally here. "Captain," Myrath said as Arya approached him, "this is it. This is where we begin again." Arya smiled at the elder, her eyes filled with understanding. "You've been through so much already, Elder Myrath, but now you're free. You have a future, and we'll help you build it." Myrath bowed his head slightly. "I cannot thank you enough. You and your people have given us hope when all seemed lost. This is a new beginning." Arya placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's not just us, Elder. It's everyone, humans and Ziranite alike. Together, we'll create something better." The landing was smooth, and within hours, the first group of Ziranite survivors had set foot on the new planet. The air was fresh, the sky a brilliant shade of blue. The land stretched out before them, untouched and full of promise. For the first time in a long while, the Ziranite could breathe freely, unburdened by the horrors of war. Arya stood at the edge of the landing site, watching as the Ziranite began to explore their new home. The crew of the EOs worked alongside them, offering assistance with setting up temporary shelters and distributing supplies. The Ziranite may have lost their home, but they were not without hope. "Captain, we've got everything set up here," Commander David Hall reported, his voice calm but filled with pride. "The medical teams are ready to assist with any injuries or health concerns, and we've secured the surrounding area. This place is safe." Arya nodded, satisfied. "Good work, David. Let's make sure the Ziranite have everything they need. We'll be staying here for a while until they're settled." The days that followed were filled with hard work. The Ziranite and humans worked together, building shelters, setting up farms, and securing resources. The Ziranite, though still grieving their losses, had a determination to rebuild. They were resilient, and with the help of the humans, they started to find their footing once again. Captain Arya Voss watched as the Ziranite children played in the fields, their laughter ringing through the air. It was a sound she had hoped to hear when they first arrived, proof that the survivors were starting to heal. They were no longer just refugees, they were beginning to build a community. At night, the Ziranite gathered around campfires, sharing stories of their past. They spoke of their homeworld, its oceans, its forests, its cities, but they also spoke of hope, the hope that they would rebuild. They spoke of the future, of a world where they could live in peace, where their children could grow up without fear. And in these quiet moments, Arya realized that she had been right all along. Humanity had given them more than just a chance at survival. They had given them something that had been taken from them: their dignity. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the Ziranite began to build a new life. The humans, though no longer needed to provide constant aid, remained close by, offering help when necessary. Arya often found herself in the company of Elder Myrath, Talia, and the other Ziranite leaders. Together, they discussed the future of the Ziranite, making plans for how they would adapt to their new home and how they could make the most of the resources available to them. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Elder Myrath approached Area. "Captain," he said, his voice full of respect, "we owe you everything. Without you and your people, we would have been lost." Area smiled, a feeling of warmth spreading through her. "You've done the hard part, Elder Myrath. You've survived. And now, you're rebuilding. That's something to be proud of." He looked out at the horizon, where the stars were beginning to appear. "We have a long way to go, but I believe we can do it. With your help, we can restore the Ziranite what we once were, and more." Area nodded. "And I'll be right here, helping you every step of the way." As the Eos remained in orbit, watching over the Ziranite, Captain Area Voss knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning. Together, humanity and the Ziranite would create a future where both could thrive. A future where they would never again be alone in the vast, endless expanse of space. The Eos hovered silently in orbit above the Ziranite's new home. The planet below had become a symbol of hope, not only for the Ziranite, but for humanity as well. In the months since their arrival, the planet had begun to flourish. New cities were being built, farms were producing crops, and the Ziranite were finally starting to reclaim their future. Captain Area Voss stood in the command center of the Eos, her eyes fixed on the planet below. The stars around her were silent, but she could feel the weight of the work ahead. This wasn't just about providing for the Ziranite. It was about forging a future where both humans and Ziranite could coexist, learn from each other, and thrive together. "Captain," Lieutenant Jonas's voice interrupted her thoughts. "We've received an important message from the Galactic Council. They're sending a delegation to assess the Ziranite's progress and offer further assistance." Area nodded, her expression thoughtful. "We knew this day would come. It's time for the Council to see what we've accomplished." The Galactic Council had been skeptical at first, unsure whether humanity could truly help a race so devastated by war. But as the months passed, the evidence was clear. The Ziranite were rebuilding, and humanity had proven itself as their allies. Now the Council would see the strength of the bond between the two species. As the Council's ships approached, the crew of the Eos prepared for their arrival. The Ziranite leaders, including Elder Myrath and Talia, gathered to meet the delegation, their expressions a mix of pride and nervous anticipation. For them, this was another step in the journey toward recovery. Area stood beside them, her presence a quiet reminder of the strength and support humanity had offered. She had seen the Ziranite at their lowest point, when they had lost everything. But now, standing with them on this new world, she saw their resilience, their determination to rise again. The Council's ships landed on the planet's surface, their sleek, metallic forms glinting in the light of the setting sun. A group of Council members disembarked, led by a tall, imposing figure dressed in elaborate robes. This was Supreme Ambassador Ilara, the head of the Council's delegation. Ambassador Ilara's gaze swept over the land before her, taking in the newly built settlements and the lush green fields. "I must admit, Captain Voss, when we first heard of your mission, we had our doubts. But now, I see something different. The Ziranite are not just surviving, they are thriving." Area stepped forward, her expression proud but humble. "It hasn't been easy, Ambassador, but the Ziranite are strong. They faced unimaginable loss, and yet they are rebuilding with determination and hope." Ilara nodded slowly. "You and your people have done more than anyone could have expected. This planet, this community, it is a testament to the strength of both the Ziranite and humanity." Elder Myrath approached, his voice steady. "We owe much to the humans. Without their help, we would not be here today. They did not turn away from us when the rest of the galaxy did. They gave us hope." Ilara's eyes softened as she looked at the Elder. "Perhaps the galaxy needs to learn from humanity. It is easy to turn away from the weak, but it takes strength and courage to stand by those who need help the most." The conversation shifted as the delegation toured the settlement, speaking with the Ziranite and the human workers who had helped them. They witnessed the schools being built, the new farms producing food, and the medical clinics that had helped heal the wounded. The Ziranai were no longer a broken people. They were a people on the rise. That evening, as the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Arya stood alone on a hill overlooking the settlement. The sounds of construction and laughter echoed in the distance, but there was a quiet peace in the air. The weight of the mission was still there, but it no longer felt as heavy. The future was bright for the Ziranai, and humanity had earned a place in that future. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, lost in thought, but she was eventually joined by Elder Myrath. He stood beside her, gazing at the same view, a smile on his face. "Captain," he said softly, "I have seen many things in my life, but nothing like this. We have been given a second chance, and I believe we will make the most of it." Arya smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "You've already done more than I ever expected, Elder. You've shown the galaxy that even in the darkest times, there is hope. You've reminded us all that we are stronger when we stand together." Myrath looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "And we will continue to stand together. The bond between our people is unbreakable now." As the night fell, the stars above the new Ziranai world seemed brighter than ever before. The Eos remained in orbit, a silent guardian of the world below. The humans and the Ziranai had created something extraordinary, something that would last for generations. The Galactic Council had promised to provide ongoing support, but the truth was, the Ziranai no longer needed to depend on anyone. They had their future in their hands. With humanity by their side, they would build a new civilization, one that would stand as a beacon of hope to the galaxy. Captain Arya Voss knew that the journey was far from over. There would be challenges, and there would be obstacles to overcome. But she also knew this: the Ziranai were not alone anymore. Humanity had chosen to stand with them, and together they would forge a future brighter than either could have imagined.